So as we talk about leadership this morning, we're going to look at what's called the square. But I want to say a couple of things. There are so many different ways people lead. And you know, it's fun watching adults do this, because when we do this with high schoolers, they never touch each other. Yeah. They stand back and they bark out instructions. No, turn that way. No, the other way. It's like, could you be more specific which way you want me to go? You know, and then the revenge session happens. But I think the funniest thing I ever saw was we did this with some kids at Clackamas High School years ago, and the guy had this girl and he thought he'd be funny, and they were doing it through the neighborhood. So they went up to this house, he rang the doorbell, told her to stand there, and then he hid in the bushes. She opened her eyes. So, people are creative when they lead, but we're talking about leadership, and we're talking about, in particular, the leadership style of Jesus, okay? So we call this the square, but when we look at it, we look at Mark chapter 1, verse 15 to 20, and Jesus says, "The time has come, the kingdom of God has come near, repent and believe the good news." Then he goes on and says, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. Now you guys just kind of I didn't give you time to get to know each other at all. How many of you would have felt better if you had a little bit more time to get to know each other and kind of settle down and then do this thing? Can you imagine Jesus coming along and saying, "Hey, you, come with me." And you just drop everything you're doing, you leave your family, the whole 9 yards, and follow this person. Now I have to give you a little bit of information. They knew about Jesus. They didn't know him, but they knew about him because Jesus had done a few things up until this point. And so now that he's ready to start his ministry, he's bringing these people in. And so there had to be a little bit of something in them to just blindly go follow that guy, right? How many of you in this room, if you're honest with yourself, if someone walked in the room today and was very charismatic, would say, "I'll go with you"? Yeah, we're all like, "Well, let's see your credentials," and yeah. And so when he'd gone a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat preparing their nets. Without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with a hired man and followed him. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't just leave my family like that. That would be kind of strange. You know, okay, so Jesus' model, his development model of leader, he used what we call an adaptive style, okay? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. It was not a consensus style, if you know what I mean. Jesus didn't get together with the disciples and say, "Okay, guys, let's take a vote. Where would you like to go? Who would you like to heal today? What miracle would you like me to perform? We got a 50-50 tie. We need a tiebreaker here. There's 12 of you and 6 of you want divine healing and 6 of you want me to walk on water. Which one?" He didn't operate like that. So what exactly is that? All right. So we're going to look at, from a biblical perspective, some of the things he did and put it into our secular mentality. "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." We've heard that. So we have this square, as you see, we call it the leadership square. L1 would be leader 1. That's a level of leadership. D1 is disciple, okay? So in this case, L1, the leader is basically saying, "I'm going to do it, you're going to watch, and then we're going to talk." Okay, that makes sense? That's a very directive style. It's That's kind of what you were doing when the blind walk, wasn't it? I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're going to do it. Unless you want to walk into the wall. Okay, so that's the first one. For the person that's the disciple, we call it unconscious incompetence. In other words, they have no idea what they're getting ready to do. They don't know what they're getting into. And so they are totally reliant on that leader to lead them. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you have people in your leadership, under your leadership, that are like this? You know, they're helping you in ministry, and they're totally reliant upon you to tell them what to do next.
Sometimes I do stuff and go, is that right?
Yeah. And how does that feel as a leader? Because sometimes we want to speed up and get down the roads like, look, quit asking me and do it yourself now, right? But there's a reason for that, because we're leading them down a trail that they have not gone before. And so as a directive leader, I need to understand, I've got to take care of them. I've got to look after them and walk them through this process, okay? Then there's another style called coaching leadership that goes with this square. It says, and here's what it says. This is Jesus when remember he was on the water with these guys and he went to sleep? Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. Now keep in mind, the fishermen on the boat are seasoned people of being out on the sea. They've seen a lot of storms. So for them to be afraid, there had to be something serious going on with the water. And he replied, as we get down the line, you have little faith. Why are you so afraid? Then he got up and said, chill. And the wind and the waves were calm. All right? This takes us to coaching leadership. L2, I do, you help, and then we talk. Now, that's probably a little hard to see in that illustration. What did Jesus do and how did they help? You know, basically, Jesus was going to the other side of the lake, and they went with him. When something happened, he showed them how he can deal with it. And later, how they can deal with it as they grew in their faith. Okay, so what that represents for the disciples is the conscious incompetence. They knew how to steer the boat and get across the lake. So Jesus didn't do anything. He kicked back and went to sleep. But they suddenly ran into a problem, and they immediately knew, we can't fix this. That's when they called upon him. The next style is what we call consulting leadership. Jesus replied, they do not need to go away. He's talking about all the people when it was the feeding of the 5,000. You give them something to eat. We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. And that led to you do, I help. Because what happened was, if you know the story, they did the work and then Jesus blessed it. This was a conscious competence now. They were very conscious of what Jesus could do, but they needed him to do it. Then we get to what we call delegating leadership. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. He's delegating to them what to do now. Okay, we call it the Great Commission. You do, I watch. Unconscious competence. At that point, what the disciples were supposed to be able to do was, without any question, fulfill the mission that God had given them. Now, we know that part of that story is added in Acts 2 when they waited upon the Holy Spirit that empowered them to do those things. But Jesus had for 3 years shown them how to do this work, and so now they know. It would be like you going to Bible college or seminary, and then graduation day, and now it's your turn to go out and do ministry. Remember how you felt? You could take on the world until you had your first ministry assignment and go, oh God, I screwed up. Unless you're like Devin and you lose half your youth group out in the ocean. Yes, sir.
An error that I made in the slides. That's supposed to say L4D4. So sorry, I was copying and pasting.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the lessons from those 4 things. This was Jesus' ministry style, what we call it that. It was about multiplication, not control. Many times when we do ministry, we want to control everything that goes on. And then there's an oxymoron there because, let's be honest, how many times have we said, okay, I want to give this assignment to the staff, and then we don't take our hands off of it? That happens a lot. Some of the people that came with the leaders refused to look at them because the leader's going, I don't do that, do I? Yeah, you do. Okay, so it's about that. And so when we go back and look at this, and that whole pattern, how many of you, just take a show of hands. If you were a leader, do you understand the directives D1, the coaching D2, the consultant D3, and the delegating D4? Do you really think you have a handle on that? Just a question. Okay, well, we'll find out. Okay, because when we pair that up on the multiplication side, remember all those different things I do, you watch, and so forth and so on. Now all that's in play. Now multiplication is starting to happen. And it's really funny because I had this question asked of me a couple of weeks ago. Well, when you're building your ministry team, don't you want everybody to be a D4? Do you? Why not?
Too many chiefs and not enough Indians?
Too many chiefs, not enough Indians? That's a good one. But what does that do for the leader? It makes the leader lazy. It really does, because if I've got D1, 2, 3, and 4 in the group, I know that I'm have to shift and work with each individual. One of the cool things about Jesus was he dealt with people where they were at. And if I got all D4s, I'm going to sit back and say, all right, guys, go ahead and do it. And I'm chilling. But he was constantly, there was this tension. He was here, sometimes over here, here, because he had guys in different levels. A good example is Thomas. Was Thomas a D4? Until I have proof, is what he said. So, situational style, that's what that kind of represents. He dealt with them in the different situations where they were. All right, so Here's the 4 types of leadership within that square. Directive, that's giving directions, giving instruction. Coaching. Now let's go back to the blind walk a little bit. Those of you that were directive were really hands off. And no, don't go there. Take 2 steps. I heard somebody go, count 2 steps and stop. Now turn to your left. I mean, they were giving step-by-step instructions. And the person followed perfectly to the T. Is that the way you want to lead in your church from here on out? Okay, and some people were coaching. Man, you're doing really good. Now, if you would just push a little harder, more coffee would come out. Okay, they were pulling the top off of the cream. Pull it a little more. There you go. Now, and they added a little direction to it, like guiding their arm over. Now turn. They were coaching them through that, and that was really cool to watch. And then some of you, not only were you protective of your people in your coaching, you go, we're about to pass Fred. Somebody said, be prepared for something. Because there were a few of you, I actually touched the tip of your nose. Andrew went by and I blew in his ear. But you see what was going on in leadership style and how you're floating through this, whatever the situation is, that's where you had to be. Consulting. Now that you've given them the responsibility and they know what it is, you just walk alongside of them and go, and they can bounce ideas off of you. You give your volunteers, leaders, whatever you call them in your ministry, an assignment, and you kind of help them get started and they get going, and they come back to you and they say, we were thinking about doing this, what do you think? You're not telling them what to do, but you're helping them weigh the options that they have, and then they decide. See, that's where you got to remember. They decide. You don't control it at that point. That's not consulting. All right? And then delegating. All right, guys, go. Tell me how it turns out in your report next week. So that's real simple. That dotted line is there because people have a tendency to fall on one side or the other using 2 of those. People who are very direct also delegate. In other words, here, take this and use it out there.
Do you have any direction about how I use it?
See, that's kind of what happens when I do that, is I give her some direction, take it, and then I take my hands off of it, and she goes out there, and what happens if it's not what I want? I wasn't very good at being directive, but I was very good at getting rid of something I don't want to do. Okay. Now, the other side of that line is coaching and consulting. I've got people, that's kind of where I want to be personally. And I say that way because I want to help people get started. I want them to feel comfortable coming back to me if they have issues and making decisions, but I want to keep my hands off of it as much as possible. Now, if my motivation is right, it's because I want them to grow, not because I don't want to do it. But the reality is, in Jesus' ministry, he was all 4. All 4. He gave direction. He coached them through it. They could bounce off of him, and then he let them go. He commissioned them to do it. Okay, so here we are. We talked about this, how on this side of the line, on this side of the line. So D2 moments are really key And that's kind of what we get into. Is that where most people in your mind get stuck, Michael?
Yeah, usually it's where people give up and go find a new vision to pursue because they realize they're now conscious incompetence causes them to go, I guess I wasn't suited for this. Let me find a different thing to do.
Yeah. Have you seen that happen in your ministry? People give up? Okay. Now, here's the pit of D2, which he just described. We'll make this little ladder over here, because you're down in a pit, so to speak. And how people get in that pit is time. Sometimes they don't have the time. They take on the task, or they have to, or we require too much time of them. But time is of essence.
Hold on, actually, it's the opposite. So they're already in the pit because they've got conscious incompetence. So they're feeling like, I don't know how to do this, and I'd like to get out of this responsibility. So when they're in the pit, what coaching style leadership as an L2 looks like is you need to give them time with you to help them overcome it. So it's not about what got them into the pit.
Okay.
Their conscious incompetence and recognizing, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do this. This is what the coaching leader needs to do to help them get out of the pit.
Okay. And then vision, sometimes it's lack of vision.
Yeah, you usually got to remind them because
Yeah.
the conscious incompetence, we know what it's like when we realize I can't do this. This is like the cave that Paul was in, my testimony. I can't do this. What we need is a coaching kind of leader who will remind us it's going to be okay. Here's the bigger vision. This isn't about you.
And that was the person who said, relax, Fred is coming. And lots and lots and lots and lots of grace. And let me give you a good example of grace. This actually happened to me. I was 19 years old. I was at Warner Pacific. I was taking upper division classes that I should not have had yet. And I had a professor by the name of Dr. Ralph G. Turnbull. And Dr. Turnbull was known around the world. He went to school with a guy named Eric Liddell. If you remember the movie Chariots of Fire, that's where he went to school, in Scotland. And so we're in this class, and I'm a basketball player, and you know how we are, the prima donnas that we are. And we had this class, it was called A Minister's Obstacles. We sat around a table. He only took 12 students at a time in class because he said, that's the way our Lord did it, and that's the way I'm doing it. So we had 12 people around this table, and I mean, this guy was brilliant. Just to give you an idea, he had like 3,000 books on the walls all the way around from floor to ceiling in his classroom. And so we're in there, and we would come from another class, and we'd be arguing about something we had in Old Testament lit or whatever. And he'd be sitting there listening to us, and he goes, before we get started, Mr. Douglas, he called us Mr. or Miss or whatever, would you go over to that shelf, that book section of books, third shelf up, fourth book in, turn to page such and such, and read the first paragraph. And there's the answer. And we're all like, whoa, what manner of man is this? You know, yeah, and he was in his 80s at the time. And he got up every morning at 4 and studied before teaching. Every day, except Sunday. And so this was the mentality of this guy. So I'm in this class with him, and everybody's talking, and they're talking about all the stuff, and I'm winging it. I don't have the book. I was busy trying to decide, am I going to be a starter this year or what? You know, my mind was somewhere else. And oh, you showing that picture?
Really look like
He stayed in my house and saw my senior picture from college with an afro. And so thank God it wasn't with high shorts and knee-high socks. But where was it? Oh yeah. And so he looked at me and he said, Mr. Douglas, you haven't said anything the whole class. Because these classes were in 2-hour blocks, like from 1 to 3 or 2 to 4, depending on which day of the week it was. And so I'm summarizing everything I heard, and I'm, you know, and I made up an answer, and he just looked at me and he said, oh, okay. And that was the end of it. Class is over. Everybody's getting up to leave. I'm getting ready to go to practice. I'm like, whew, got out of that one. And he says, Mr. Douglas, can I talk to you for a second? I said, sure. And so I come over, and he says, I'm really intrigued by your answer. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, you said such and such. I go, yeah. He goes, where did you surmise that from the book? I said, well, I don't have my book with me today. He said, that's okay, I have one. He slid the book over in front of me, and I looked down. I hadn't seen the book yet. And I looked down at it, and I look at the book, and it says, A Minister's Obstacle, the title of the book and the class, written by Ralph G. Turnbull. Busted. And I go, so I just said, I got to be honest with you, Doc, I haven't bought the book yet. He goes, I figured that. And he goes, I'm going to give you this copy. But he said this, I admire your youthful exuberance, but I implore you to put it to good use because you have a bright future ahead of you. Now, if that isn't grace, I don't know what is. Because he could have destroyed me in front of the whole class to begin with, and he didn't. And he mentored me from that point forward until he died. I was out of college, and he was still doing stuff for me. Every Christmas, he sent me $100 to buy books. Because he wanted me to read and study. So, coming out of that pit, there's grace. All right? And so here we are with the Kairos process that we've been talking about in Mark. And we get to a point somewhere in our ministry, in our lives, when all this stuff comes together in our heads and now we get it, right? When is that point for you? When does it all come together and you kind of, when do you know if you are or are not capable of coaching in all four, or responding in all four quadrants? What is God saying to you at this moment about your leadership style, the way you lead, the people you lead? What are you going to do about it? You know, I got a text from a guy last night. He goes, man, our church has grown all of a sudden and I'm not sure what to do. And I've been trying to get him to come to the next cohort of this. And he says, I need to sit down with you. Can you tell me what I can do? You know, where are you in that process? And what are you going to do about it? So we're going to take time now. If you remember the sweetest method, we're going to do some silent reflection. Then going to share what caught your attention. And then what does the rest of the room need to hear? So we're going to take, would you time it for me?
60 seconds.
What is it, 2 minutes or 3?
60 seconds.
60 seconds, okay.
1 minute.
Do that now. Okay. Now we're going to turn to your partner or somebody nearby, pair up, and share with them what caught your attention about the leadership square.
You'll switch places. Give me 3 minutes to do that. Ready? Go.
Let them know at the minute and a half mark.
Usually I'm watching that. Hey, make sure you switch sides. Yeah, so what
I got that one turned around. I don't know.
That's what I was. That's why there were 2 of them where I thought, oh, and I was watching where you're going because there's a spot to do it Fred's way because you bring so much experience to the table.
Yeah.
But I know that you're trying to fit it with, like, the expectation is fit it within, like, this deliverable here. And so, yeah, that one I'm like, wait, like that. I wanted to make sure to correct that. So there were a couple of areas that were like that.
What was
Probably
that?
like somebody like
that?
Devin is going to go, wait a minute, that's not actually the way that we teach it.
Yeah.
And so, which is good. You know, that's where you kind of see, like, oh, there's an accountable community with specific tools. So we may face that kind of question while we listen to the room. But
What was the other
they
one?
don't say anything.
What was the other one? You said there were 2.
Other one, yeah. The other one was, so when you went into situational leadership, you're right, those are all situational, but the point of that bullet is to get at what you said. Some of you are probably D1 to 4, and you gave the example with Cheryl and all of that. Some of you are probably or L2 and L3, and you kind of like show them, like, you probably do this thing, and it has consequences when you don't learn to do the other thing.
Yeah.
And usually the key takeaway is you have to learn to be intentional about what doesn't come natural to you.
Okay.
That's that tagline right there.
Okay.
Because see, I'm an L1, L4 leader because that's how I had to learn. I didn't have anybody to teach me anything along the way, so I was scrappy and I learned on my own. So what I do is I give away what I did, and I think, well, if I learned how to do it, everybody else can. That's not the case. So I've had to be very intentional to slow down to learn to do L2.
All right, switch if you haven't had a chance to share.
Pass the mic. And then when I give this next direction, what you'll want to say is, again, what did you hear the other person say that you think the rest of the room needs to hear?
I picked up on that.
Yeah.
When I watched you do that twice now.
And I was trying to be really explicit last night with it, just in case there were any of those. We had newer people. That was their first time hearing it.
Okay, everybody. Okay, so if we can turn our attention back here. All right, so should I do like 6th grade? Everybody can clap once. Eyes on me, yeah. That's sports. What did you hear from the person that was talking to you? Not what you said, but what they said that you think was worthy for the whole group to hear. We know everything is worthy, but what did you think was significant that they might? Yes, ma'am.
She talked about, as a leader, of being able to give herself the grace too, not falling into, like, you automatically have to be enough, but sometimes you feel like we're not enough, right? And being okay and living in that as a leader of saying, we don't know everything, and I can rely on other people who do. I don't always have to have the answer, and it's okay if I don't. So just giving herself the grace that she's not always, she's not everything up there, and that's okay.
Because sometimes when we're leading, People bring gifts to the group that we're leading that we don't have expertise. And you know, if you're familiar with the Navy SEALs, that's how they operate. There are 8 people in the SEAL team. Now they have a lieutenant usually in their group who's in charge overall, but he becomes the low guy on, or she becomes the low person on the totem pole if they're going to do bomb ordnance, because they have a specialist on how to blow up bridges. Or if it's a medical situation, or if it's some kind of tactical thing, it's no longer the lieutenant who's in charge, it's the petty officer that's in charge. And so that balance is very good. Any other?
Let me just say that too, and I think too, like Jenny, in your circumstance, and this is common for others in this room, you talk about that shadow of legacy.
Yeah.
Like you have a pattern that was set, everybody has an imprint of what leadership should look like.
Yeah.
You recognize I am not that, but you still live under the expectation, and then you try to like do it all, and then deal with like, I feel like a failure. And what I'm hearing you say is, you know, Fred's trying to say, when you're training up people and they get to that conscious incompetence and they recognize they don't know how to do it, here's how you step in and help them.
Yeah.
But you're saying, that's me. And usually for us leaders, we don't have anybody to turn to. So what we recognize is I need somebody that can give me time and vision and grace to get out of this. Because I'm just like treading water. So the reason why we want to create a learning community is so that you don't have to do it alone. We're not trying to say we'll be the rescuers. Now we can help, but there's a whole bunch of people in this room. We don't have to do it alone. I'm so grateful that you brought that up.
And if I can add to that, sorry, I don't have a voice this morning. I don't know why, but I don't. But, to add to that, of just, I am my own person, and God has called me to lead in His own way, my own way. I am not the former pastors. And to lean into that fully and say, Jenny, show yourself grace. This is who God has called you to be. So find those people around you that might not have the strengths that you have, but still lean into who God has uniquely called you to be.
It's really good.
You know, Henry Ford had to do that. When he got interviewed back in the 50s by a reporter, the guy goes, how is it you, a guy with only a 6th grade education, can run this $1 million company? And he said, you see that box right there? I push that button, my lawyer comes in. I push that button, my accountant comes in. He went down, he goes, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, I don't have to be. I have the people around me. I just need to know how to make informed decisions. That's my role. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
The thing that Megan said was, how many people were led differently than they led, like the second person led the first person differently than they were led. So like, did you lead the same way as the person led you? And the question was, are we leading the same way we were led? Right? You reproduce who you are, not who you think you are. Like that's something that we had a professor who said to us often. It's like, you reproduce who you are, not who you think you are. And so if you look around and go, oh, I don't like that, you have to look at yourself and go, oh, am I reproducing that? And so that was a question she had, was how many people led differently than they were led?
And that was said this morning, I think, in somebody's talk or devotional, whatever it was, about Jesus leading. But the idea was that I lead as Jesus empowers me to lead versus me being this. Was that you? Who was it that said that this morning? Everything's running together for me right now. Oh, it might have been last night, for all I know. But instead of me trying to be Michael empowered me, but what he empowered me with, I now do it with my flavor on it. And I want to kill that fly. But you're right. And how many, just curious, how many of you led the same way the person led you when you started in ministry? Who are you a carbon copy of?
Well, no, I mean, I was talking in this regard, but in regards, I think there's pieces going into my ministry, that say, you're talking outreach and being in the community and some of those things. I mean, I think I've taken pieces of really good parts. Tom Doherty's great at that. I mean, he's the state pastor, he's those things. He's on the radio show, he's out in the community, and oftentimes he leverages, I need to go get food, so I'm gonna go pick a place that I'll get food from. Wow, that's how I just goes around.
He goes to the speaker.
Being led by the Spirit.
Yeah, but he'll like.
I thought that was a dove.
Build a relationship with a place like Nothing But Cakes or Lee's Candy are two places in Boise. And he'll go and establish a relationship there, but oftentimes then he takes that and leverages that to take that to his visitation, people that he's in need. So he like has multiple connection points that he'll use just in that. And so I think there's parts of that yeah, he's led, and it's really allowed me to be a part of the community. Like you've been challenging us in our independent level. So yeah, I think you pick things up. But it's like parenting, right? It's like the Lord of the Rings. You inherit your uncle's ring. Will you be driven crazy by it and just have that? Or will you set out on this journey to remedy it? And my hope for those ones are that I can remedy that I take the good parts. There's not like, I don't just parent because I don't want to ever discipline my kids because I hated that I grew up with a Samoan father that the word sasa means spanking, and they were more than the other kids that I had that I grew up with, right? Like, no, there's accountability and there's those things, and I just had to find for my own, what does that mean now that I'm a parent, right?
But I want the ring.
Let me add something to that. So Fred and I, while we were dialoguing, like, because again, we're doing development and delivery even here. We're like actively working that out. So I was like, okay, like I stepped in at that one point because I needed to actively correct the pit of B2 because that was going to come out wrong. And I said there was one other area, and I didn't say anything because I want Fred to come out through something that we are trying to deliver, but I still want it to be Fred's version versus just the way that Michael would have done it. And it hits exactly this. So when we went into situational leadership, some of us operate like a D1, D4 leader. That's the style that I tend toward. Here's the idea, now go do it and figure it out. That's because that's the way I was taught, because I didn't have anybody else to depend upon. And so the key takeaway is what you do naturally, that's my natural thing. You have to recognize what you don't do naturally, and you have to be really intentional. So I've had to be really intentional about how to learn to grow as an L2 and L3 leader that coaches and consults along the way. Because it used to be, hey, here's the directive, go do it. Well, Fred, you dropped the ball. You are not the right person for me. So we do tend to reproduce what we received. And that's good, that's a good starting point, but we have to recognize which one of those am I not good at, and how can I grow intentionally to learn from somebody else to teach me to fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
I think we got time for one more.